Good evening, everyone. It's again still January the 9th, 2025. Like I said, it's been a sad thing that I just had to report, but I wanted to explain a little bit about our Canadian winters here that people don't realize, and a lot of people and a lot of students who come up from very warm countries, it's a real shock. Even our refugees find it a shock for winter and trying to figure out why we have all these boots and hats and coats and stuff that we have to put on for the weather. And I just wanted to also say that I wanted to start with what my childhood was like here in Ottawa. And I got the idea of this because having lived through from childhood, I was hearing a thing on the news last week from a meteorologist that was, I guess, going over the year's records of the weather reports for the different regions and in parts of the country. And even he actually verified that the winters that we had as children here were not the winters that we're having now due to the climate change, where everything's melting, everything's warmer. But I'd like to explain some of my childhood, what it was like being here growing up. When I was a child, we had the snowbanks. We were in the snow belt. We haven't had that much snow. Only once in a blue moon we seem to have a winter where we have a lot more snow than normal. But I can remember walking to school with snowbanks at least 8 feet high on both sides of me. And being having to be driven to school. I remember the cold. On the coldest days of the winter, my mother would drive us to school. Because we didn't have school buses, or we had to walk 1.5 miles, sometimes 2 miles to school. And if it's in the minus 30s, it is really cold to try and get to school. So fortunately, back in those days, seatbelts were not mandatory. So I remember on those cold days, my mom, we'd see students walking, trying to get in against the wind, everything, trying to get to school. And it was so terribly important. We didn't have snow days or cold days or anything like that. So my mom would stop, and we had just a regular size Austin, and this is how we ended up packed. In the front seat, I'd be in the passenger seat. Mom would put someone in the middle between us, since they were bench seats. Then she'd stick another person on top of the person beside me in the front seat, someone on top of my lap, and the back seat. She'd have 4 people across the back seat, 4 of the kids, and then there'd be another 4 kids piled on top of them, and sometimes we'd squeeze another one lying down on top of the second pile of children. So she would drive us to school so we would not get frostbite. And it was bad because kids often came to school with frostbite on their toes and their fingers because they were not properly dressed, or some of them were so poor they couldn't even afford boots. But even the boots back in those days were really terrible, because what it was, you had your shoes, and what they had was like galoshes. You pulled those boots, they weren't warm, they just basically kept your feet dry. So you pull them over your foot, over your shoe, put it on, and then you buckle it up from the side. And they were freezing. And so this leads me into even what it is today. Like we are very lucky we don't have to wear shoes in our boots today, and we have it's on the different temperature. Saying on the boots is good to minus 15, minus 20, minus 25, or minus 70 for the weather. So we're a far better prepared than we were as children, trying to even just get ourselves to school. And but I've seen kids just improperly dressed going to school, because some of them were so poor back in my time, they didn't have the proper clothes, and they did not understand. And we understood, most of us, that we had to dress in layers, and we were properly dressed. And I mean, boy, I was so tight I could barely move with all the layers of clothes on me when it got cold. I mean, my mom made sure I was nice and warm, the best that she could at the time. But there was other kids that were not like that, and that's kind of like what the homeless remind me of, is these poor children who came to school with us that did not know how to dress properly. But then after, again, my mom would drop one load off, she'd go back, starting back home, she'd see more kids walking to school, and she'd take a second trip back with the kids, literally piled in the car in such a manner. And I remember when you're talking about boots, I remember being in a protest march. This was a few years before the pandemic, and it was beautiful. I had my boots for minus 25, and it started out, it was only like minus maybe 12. It wasn't bad out. I felt I was okay. I was comfortable. We were standing there on the island, and within an hour, the temperature dropped 15 degrees when the north wind just turned around, and we were not getting that sudden southwesterly breeze. It just turned right around. We were straight in the northwest coming down from the Arctic. And I remember how cold I was, so I was talking to the police liaison officer at the time, and I was just suddenly shivering, and my feet were just like ice, just ice cubes all of a sudden. I felt so cold. And others were still in running shoes. I couldn't figure out how they managed. And then we had elders that were in wheelchairs, and we had with canes, and they were trying to get through this. And it was because the temperature change. The day before, it was nice. There was no snow on the ground whatsoever. We had snow overnight, and they couldn't clear the roads. Well, they cleared the roads, but they couldn't clear the sidewalks. And at this point in time, it was awful because we didn't have a permit to go on the road. You know, the police, you require a permit today because we were going to take the sidewalks, but unfortunately, nobody was expecting the snowstorm to hit because of climate change. It's been much nicer up into even November, and this is a temperature change that we've seen. And so I was bundled up, and I was grateful for the fact that the officer let me in to warm up my feet. But I'm sitting there, and my feet are thawing, and I'm saying, oh boy, I didn't know how bad it was going to be, and how cold it was going to be. Or else and I said, well, my boots are good for minus 25 below. And the officer turns around and tells me, well, my boots are good to minus 70 below, and my feet are freezing in boots that are supposed to be good for minus 70 below. That's how cold it was that day. And then since there was no permit to go on the street, which the city police normally require, there was a bit of a problem because they had to scramble because we couldn't get our elders and with the wheelchairs and that down the sidewalk. So we were forced to use the road to get them up to Parliament Hill, and left the Ottawa police, unfortunately, were scrambling. We didn't mean to let them scramble, but they had so that they could get us through the intersections and that as quick as possible to get us up to the hill. And so it was an oops moment, nothing planned, because unfortunately the organizer wasn't aware of definitely Canada, well, this part of Canada's weather, I guess, and how quickly things change here for us. And when she booked it, she wasn't, it was so nice, she wasn't thinking of snow in November at that point, where she, just a slip of the mind there. So it was just a big oops moment, but we made it up to the hill, and very grateful that we did make it up to the hill. But that was it. Within an hour, we dropped 15 degrees. That's how quick it happens. So if you're a homeless person, you're out in the street, and it just drops like that. That is very, very, very dangerous. So I wanted to explain part of that on frigid cold and how, and I know I've even immigrants coming over, and that I've often had to talk to them about how to dress properly in our weather, because I know how to do that sort of thing. And like I said, living in a climate like this, it's you never know what to expect. So you have to try to be prepared. And like I said, I thought I was prepared with boots at minus 25. We're going to be just fine. And I started out, as I said, just fine. But this is why it's so dangerous. And you know, we cannot just leave these vulnerable people out on the streets, because things change very, very fast. So I just wanted to sort of brief you in on that and explain a little bit about how quickly things can change. For those I know in other countries, I know some people from other countries, warm countries, don't fully understand what we're talking about when this frigid cold hits. So I wanted to put up something, and I feel badly. And like I said, I understand, because a lot of children froze going to school. As a matter of fact, I remember one incident, I think a child fell on the snowbank and froze to death on us back in those days. So that's just how dangerous it is. And I mean, if there are snowbanks, a homeless person, like I said, can fall on a snowbank and be buried if it's snowing too. So you have to be very, very careful, and these people are very vulnerable. So we have to do everything we can possibly do. And I know that they say if you do see a homeless person lying on the street or curled up, sleeping overnight in such a situation, they've said call the city number 311, and they'll get one of the outreach teams to go and check a person out. But I just wanted to explain that this is what it was like when we were children and how quickly, and the difference between then, because with the climate change, literally, we're getting warmer and warmer winters. So nobody's really understanding and really prepared like we were as children, because we were expecting the cold, we were expecting the snow, and it makes it very difficult for me. So, but I've had that experience, so when I watch the Weather Channel, I know exactly what I try to be prepared for what's coming the next day, and I know what the way I have to dress. But there's a lot of people out there that have no clue. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is when you see in that video where the outreach team has all the hats, mitts, and boots and stuff, because they're on drugs and that, and I showed you pictures here in our building at times where they get in, they're doing the drugs in the stairwell, and they leave their jackets, they leave their clothes, and so they go out. They don't feel the cold. So that is what is so dangerous as well. So we have to be so well aware of a fellow human being, and if they're incapable of looking after themselves, please pick up the phone, at least call the city, or call the police, call 911, just to make sure that you report where the homeless person is. You think they may be possibly at risk, please have an outreach team or an officer come and check that person. I don't want to see any more people lost if we can help it. So I'm going to leave it there today, and I just wanted to give you a little idea of what it was like growing up here, and for other people from other countries, just to realize how quickly our weather can change. So when they come to Canada, please be prepared. And if you don't understand what you're doing, or ask a person who's been through a Canadian winter, and then they'll be able to explain it to you. So everyone, take care tonight, or else I'll be yapping away here for the next hour or so. So take care, everyone, and we shall talk again soon. And bye-bye.